So we just talked in the previous lesson about measurements and the accuracy of measurements. And what this lesson is going to do is it's going to enable us to convert between different units of measurement. So for example, some common units that you use for volume, for example, we've talked about liters, we've got milliliters, we've got quarts, we've got pints, we've got gallons. For length, we can talk about miles, kilometers, centimeters, millimeters. For time, we can talk about seconds, hours. For mass, we can talk about kilograms or grams or tons, etc. And so what we're going to be doing in this lesson is I'm going to be showing you the proper procedure for how to convert between different units of a type of measurement. Now, there is one concept that I wanted to first introduce, and that is this concept of a prefix. Now, a prefix is simply a letter that you can put in front of a unit that will cause that unit to increase or decrease in size. So the first concept, I'm going to go to the middle right here, and it's base units. Okay, so base units are your typical units that don't have prefixes, so meters, seconds, liters, grams. As soon as you put a prefix in front of it, that letter, you will change the value of that unit. So I'm going to start with one that you're probably familiar with, centi. Okay, so 1 centi base unit. So remember, base unit could be 1 centimeter, for example. 1 centimeter equals 10 to the negative second meters. So by putting the C, the centi, in front, I've changed the value of that unit and I've made it quite a bit smaller. Because instead of having 1 meter, now 1 centimeter is 10 to the negative second meters. I've decreased the value by 100-fold. Okay, so a couple of other prefixes you might be familiar with. 1 milli, so this could be 1 millimeter equals 10 to the negative third meters, or it could be 1 milliliter equals 10 to the negative third liters. So the base unit can be either meters, seconds, liters, grams. The value, though, of that prefix, what it does to the unit is the same. So if I put a milli in front, it's now going to make it 1,000-fold smaller, 10 to the negative third. Okay, so I'm going to just read through these and make sure they make sense to you. If you put the unit tera in front, so for example, let's do 1 terameter. 1 terameter equals 10 to the 12th meters. Okay, so I just made that unit much bigger, 10 to the 12th meters. By putting a capital G in front, 1 giga, let's say 1 gigasecond, is 10 to the 9th seconds. 1 megagram, let's say for example, capital M, megagram, equals 10 to the 6 grams. This is one you should be familiar with. 1 kilometer, or 1 kilosecond, or 1 kiloliter, or 1 kilogram equals 10 to the third, either meters, seconds, liters, or grams. 1 hectometer equals 10 to the second meters, and 1 decasecond, or 1 decameter, equals 10 to the first, or just 10 seconds or meters. So notice all of the prefixes above this base unit, by putting those prefixes in front, you actually make the unit larger. Okay. However, if we go below, deci, 1 decimeter equals 10 to the negative first meters. As we said before, 1 centimeter equals 10 to the negative second meters. 1 milliliter equals 10 to the negative third liters. And this symbol is a micro, so it's a long stem for the, and then it's just a U. Okay, so 1 micrometer, for example, equals 10 to the negative 6 meters, or 1 microliter is 10 to the negative 6 liters. 1 nanometer equals 10 to the negative 9th meters. 1 picoliter equals 10 to the negative 12th liters. Okay? So by putting a prefix in front, you change the value of the unit. If we're talking about these guys above your base unit, these guys, you're making the unit larger by putting a prefix in front. If you're talking about these guys, you're making the unit smaller. Now, the good news is you don't need to memorize these. However, you'll get pretty used to using them, but I will always give you that relationship. Okay? So let's actually look at some unit conversions and we'll use these relationships as we go. So here are the steps that you need to complete for unit conversion. Step 1, you need to write your given. So let's look at our example as we go through our steps. It says how many meters are in 14.2 decameters. So my given here is 14.2 decameters. That's the value that is given to me. All right, step 1 is done. Now I need to crisscross swoosh. So what that entails, crisscross swoosh. Okay, step 3, write the unit that needs to be canceled in the denominator. So since I'm trying to get into meters, I want to get out of decameters. So I'm going to put decameters on bottom. Okay. And then step 4 tells you write the unit you want to convert to in the numerator. Well, I want to get into meters. Okay. So it says write in the conversion factor. So the relationship between meters and decameters. This will be given to you, or this table up here will be, but let's look. Deca. It says 1 deca base unit equals 10 base units. So in this case, since I'm dealing with meters, it would be 1 decameter equals 10 meters. So I'm going to put in that relationship right here. So I have 1 decameter equals 10 meters. Okay? And you'll use the relationship that's given to you. You're not expected to memorize that. So I'm going to take 14.2, and because my number is in the numerator, I'm going to multiply. If it were in the denominator, I would divide, but it's in the numerator, so I'm going to take 14.2 and multiply it by 10, and so my answer I get is 142 meters. Okay? Before I'm done, there are 2 things you always need to double check before you finish a problem. The first is significant figures. The 10 meters equals 1 decameter, that is a relationship. So that will not count towards significant figures, but 14.2 will. Well, 14.2 has 1, 2, 3 sig figs. The answer I wrote, 142, also has 3 sig figs. So I'm good there. And the last thing I need to check is, do I have units? And I put meters, so I'm good to go. So let's look at another example. Here I give you 4.5 times 10 to the negative 8th. So let me write that out. Okay, and my units are grams. Okay, crisscross swoosh. Okay, I want to get out of grams, so I'm going to put grams on bottom, and I want to get into picograms, so I'm going to put picograms up top. Okay, so now let's go back and look at the relationship. Okay, so here's my table. Notice pico is all the way at the bottom, and what this tells me is 1 pico base unit. Okay, so in this case, it would be 1 picogram equals 10 to the negative 12th grams. So I'm going to plug that in back here. So I'm going to go down. I'm going to say 1 picogram is 10 to the negative 12th grams. Okay, and now I'm going to find my answer. So I'm going to take 4.5 times 10 to the negative 8th, and I'm going to divide that by 10 to the negative 12th. Okay? Yes, you can absolutely plug this into your calculator. Another way to do it, if I'm just being given powers of 10, is you can take 10 to the negative 8th and divide it by 10 to the negative 12th. And remember, when you're dividing by exponents, what you end up doing with your exponents is you subtract. So this is going to be 10 raised to the negative 8th minus negative 12, which becomes simply 4, because negative 8 plus 12 is 4. So my answer here, I didn't use a calculator. You can, that's fine. But you don't have to, is 10 to the 4th. Okay? And my units are picograms. So quick check. Am I using 2 sig figs? Yes, I am. Do I have my units? Yes, I do. Box off my answer. I am good to go. Let's do the next problem. Number 3, convert 34 milliseconds to seconds. So I'm going to write my given, 34 milliseconds. Okay. I'm going to put the unit I want to get out of on bottom, so milliseconds. And the units I want to get into on top, so seconds. Okay. Let's go back and look at the relationship. Okay, so if you notice, milli is right here. And so for this problem, it would be 1 millisecond, second would be my base unit, equals 10 to the negative 3rd seconds. So 1 millisecond is 10 to the negative 3rd seconds. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take 34 and I'm going to multiply it by 10 to the negative 3rd. And what I end up getting is 3.4 times 10 to the negative second, and my units are seconds. Okay? I have 2 sig figs with 34, 2 sig figs with 3.4. I'm good, and I included my units. Do keep in mind, you can also write it as 0.034 seconds. Okay, keep in mind, the first value is your answer written in scientific notation. The second value is your value written in standard notation, and either one is perfectly fine. Okay, let's look at another one. 3.5 times 10 to the negative ninth microliters. So I'm going to put my given, 3.5 times 10 to the negative ninth. My units are microliters. Okay, crisscross swoosh. I'm going to put what I want to get out of on bottom, so microliters. And I'm going to put what I want to get into on top, so liters. Now I need to go look at my relationship. So notice here, 1 micro base unit, so 1 microliter equals 10 to the negative 6 liters. Okay, so 1 microliter is 10 to the negative 6 liters. Okay, so what I'm going to do to solve this, I'm going to take 3.5 times 10 to the negative ninth, and I'm going to multiply it by 10 to the negative 6. Now, yes, you can absolutely use your calculator, that's fine, or we can do a little bit of algebra. Remember, when we divided before by our exponents, we subtracted our exponents. Here, when we multiply, we actually end up adding. So negative 9 plus negative 6. So the exponent I'm going to have for my answer, so I'm going to have 3.5 times 10 to the negative 15th. And my units are liters. Okay, double check sig figs, double check units. Sig figs, 3.5 has 2 sig figs, 3.5 has 2 sig figs. Units are liters, units are liters. Okay? Now, yes, you could have written this as 0 point and then include 14 zeros, 3.5. I just really would not have liked you if you had done that. So up until this point, we've converted from a unit with a prefix to the base unit, or from the base unit to a unit with a prefix. So for example, from grams to kilograms, or from kilograms to grams. But what if I throw in 2 units with prefixes? What do I do then? Well, if you look back at your table, at your prefix table, what you'll notice is you know the relationship between kilograms here and grams, which is your base unit, and you know the relationship between grams and milligrams. However, I don't know the relationship between kilograms and milligrams. So what we're going to do here is we are going to use our conversions to go from kilograms first into grams, and then we're going to go from grams into milligrams. Okay, so let's actually do that. So I know my given is 863 kilograms. Okay, and as I noted, the first thing I'm going to want to do is I'm going to want to get out of kilograms. So I'm going to put that on bottom, and I want to get into grams. Okay, easy enough. Now I'm going to want to get out of grams because I don't want to stay in grams. That's not what it's asking for. It's asking for milligrams. So I'm now going to put milligrams on top. Okay, so go back to your table, and what you will see is that 1 kilo base unit, or 1 kilogram, is 10 to the third base units, or 10 to the third grams. Here, 1 milligram is 10 to the negative third grams, or 10 to the negative third base units, my base unit being grams. Okay? So what you can do is you can plug into your calculator 863 times 10 to the third divided by 10 to the negative third, or, which I prefer to do, I'm going to use my brain. So I'm going to do 8.63 times 10. Well, let's figure out what power of 10 this is. 863 is the same thing as saying 8.63 times 10 to the second in scientific notation, right? Because I moved my decimal place 2 places. If I then multiply by 10 to the third and divide by 10 to the negative third, to figure out my powers of 10, I know I'm multiplying a power of 2 powers of 10, so 10 to the second times 10 to the third. I'm going to add those exponents, so that's going to be 2 plus 3, and then I'm going to subtract by the power of 10 that I am dividing by. So I'm going to subtract by negative 3. So what I end up doing is taking 2 plus 3, so that gives me 8. So my final answer is going to be 8.63 times 10 to the 8th, and my units are milligrams. Okay. Keep in mind 863 has 3 sig figs. 8.63 times 10 to the 8th has 3 sig figs. My final units were supposed to be milligrams. I'm in milligrams, and I'm good to go. All right, so let's look at one more multi-step problem. Okay, so I give you 5.4 times 10 to the 7th nanometers. Okay, and I ask you to get into kilometers. Now, keep in mind, I don't know the relationship between nanometers and kilometers. What I do know is the following. I do know that 1 nanometer is 10 to the negative 9th meters, and I know that 1 kilometer is 10 to the 3rd meters. So what I'm going to want to do is first go from nanometers and convert into meters, and then from meters I can convert into kilometers. Okay? So let's do that. I'm going to go get out of nanometers, and I'm first going to get into meters. Okay? I don't want to stay in meters, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to get out of meters, and I'm going to get into kilometers. And based on the table that we just looked at, I know that 1 nanometer is 10 to the negative 9th meters, and I know that 1 kilometer is 10 to the 3rd meters. Okay, so my answer is going to be 5.4 times 10. Okay, let's do a little bit of math. So I have 5.4 times 10 to the 7th. So my 10 to the 7th. I'm going to be multiplying by 10 to the negative 9th. And then I'm going to be dividing by 10 to the 3rd. So remember, for exponents, 10 to the 7th times 10 to the negative 9th. Remember, I add my exponents there, so 7 plus negative 9. And then when I divide by an exponent, I subtract. So now I'm going to subtract by 3. So 7 plus negative 9 is negative 2. Negative 2 minus 3 is negative 5. Okay? You can always double check yourself on your calculator, but it's nice to use our brains a little bit sometimes. Okay? And that's my answer. So this was a 2-step problem. I couldn't go directly from nanometers into kilometers because I first had to go from nanometers into meters, then from meters into kilometers.